Hi guys, welcome to Missy's Imaginings. We're going to take a look today at the Mori style set number 2 for the SD Huarong BJD. And I went ahead and sewed the pattern as is, which is pretty basic when you put it together, just like the other hoodies on different videos. So that turned out really cute. It is more of a cropped style and more full on the hemline. And I'm sorry for my voice. I got my hand back, it was doing well, went back to work, and then after 2.5 years, COVID hit. So it's like, oh my stars. So I have been really sick, and my voice is still, benefiting from that. But I did feel like sitting up for a little bit, so I wanted to put some of these pieces together. And when I sewed the pattern as is, I wasn't too jazzed about the hem on these pants. I wanted them to come down more with a conical shape, getting more narrow at the bottom. And the way the pattern sews, it comes more straight, and then this actually seemed to flare out a little bit. So today we're going to take a look at what I'm going to do to change the pattern and how you can make the same alteration if you're not jazzed about this look either. The waistband overall, I did like having the little contrast fabric for the waist and of course the patch pockets. But it was this part that I didn't really like. So we're going to take a look at what I'm doing to the pattern to change it. Then we'll go ahead and sew up a new set and compare them, see how it works. Okay, so here's how the pattern pieces appear. If you download them directly from the website, this is what they'll look like, although they will have, logo stuff and all that pretty little design. But what I went ahead and did is, because I wanted this to have more of that conical shape, I trimmed the edges. So what we're going to do is I'm going to lay my new piece on here. And again, I apologize for my voice. I know it's terrible. So we're going to place this on, and in red, I'll trace what I cut off the piece. There we go. And then around here. And I was just kind of estimating what I wanted to try. So that new red line is the change I made. If you want to go ahead and measure, this is down 1 inch that is trimmed off from the edge, and then just angle it back up to the center to where it meets. And then if you want to just fold it in half and then just trim it at one time, then your edges are going to be the same. So that's the change I made to the little contrast piece for the hem. So we'll move that to the side. Then we have the actual leg of the pant, which to me, it does have a narrowing towards the hemline, but I wanted it to have more of a narrowing. It still looked a little stovepipe-ish. So let's see, we'll put it on here. And this is actually a little longer. I think it's because of the way it transposed when I scan it. So if you want to add that length, you can, just down to the bottom. And then this is what I cut off. So we'll trace the edge here. There we go. Alright, so if you want to make your length go down all the way to the bottom, then that would give you extra length. If you're fine with this length, that's fine too. It's not a huge difference because it's more of a capri pant anyway, but this red line indicates what I trimmed off, and it's pretty much just taking, trimming off to the actual seam line and then angling it back up to the cut line. So it'll have more of that rounded shape, and it'll get more narrow towards the bottom. So that's the change I made to the pattern, and I'm going to go ahead and keep these with my master set just so I remember in case anyone has questions. And then of course on the waistband, there's this piece and then this piece, and so you assemble those together to get the entire waistband. So I'm sorry for my voice. Just remember that when I'm printing or putting these on paper, it's 8.5 by 11 paper, and sometimes the pieces don't fit. So just watch for instructions for pieces that need to be connected before you actually cut your fabric. So that's the change I made to the pattern. So now we'll go ahead and cut out our fabric and go from there. Here are our cut pieces, and this time I thought I would go with a pink base for the pant. I just thought that would be kind of fun, and I did cut several layers, so I'm gonna trim where I see some of my layering made it a little wonky. There we go. And so yeah, the gray was okay, but I thought, well, I'm gonna try pink this time, just see if I like it better. So we have our waistband and our 2 patch pockets, the hem trim piece, and then the basic leg of the pant. So we'll go ahead and put these together and see if we like the results better. And I just wanted to show just a quick little note. I'm dealing with fabric that has kind of a seersucker texture to it, so that it's made to look like it's kind of wrinkly, but yet there are definite fold wrinkles where the fabric was folded. Now you want to be really careful, because if you try to iron this to get rid of your folds, you risk getting rid of the actual texture in the fabric, which I have done by mistake. So not on this one, but in the past. So what I do to try to help get rid of these fold lines is I have just a little craft iron, and before it's completely hot, I'll take it and just kind of tap it on those fold lines just to kind of help minimize them, but I don't rub it on the fabric. I just kind of press it rather than iron it. And I don't know if those terms are correct, but a long time ago when grandmas and aunties and moms were teaching me to iron, they said pressing is literally pressing like this, and sometimes you'll hold it for a long time if you're trying to press in a pleat or something like that, and ironing is this. So I don't know if that's correct, but that's what I was taught when I was a kid. So what we're doing here is lightly pressing when it's not all the way hot yet. And you can already see how much better that looks, hopefully, on the film there. It'll translate. So what I'm doing is kind of pressing out those unwanted fold lines, but I'm not ironing out the fabric texture. So we'll bring this one over. And I don't know if that's helpful to anyone or not, because if you're an experienced seamstress, I'm sure you're already well aware of this. But if you're new and you're just starting to sew with different types of fun fabrics, then that might be helpful information for you. So once again, here I'm tapping down, and it is getting a little warmer, so I think it's working a little faster, but I'm getting rid of a lot of those fold lines, but I'm not getting rid of the texture of the fabric. So that's just something to keep in mind. Then also what I did is all 4 pieces are the same because they're just pull-on pants. So I've marked a little pink dot on what will be the back of the pants up near the seam line so that I will be able to see the back of the pants, because I want to make sure that when I put my pockets on the fronts of the pants, that I make sure I use it on the opposite side, so that when I put them together, you know, I don't have one pocket on the inside of the pants and one pocket on the outside of the pants. So you want to keep the back pieces separate from the front pieces, and then when you're putting the pockets on, make sure that you have the fabric laid so that it's the opposite way, because that way it'll ensure that your pieces are gonna go together correctly when you sew it together. And I still got a couple little fold lines there. So these will be my front pieces for putting on the pockets. Then I went ahead and finished all the way around these edges for the trim, because one will be just basically turned up for a hem, so I want that to be finished on the inside. And then when we sew this to the pants, this seam won't be hidden inside the pants, but when I put these on the pants, the pant leg will actually already be put together, and because of the way this has to wrap around the leg, so I won't have an opportunity to run that seam through the serger, because it will be, you know, very small and it's hard to run it through my serger. So I'm pre-finishing the edge. Once I put the side seams of the pants together, I will also serge the hemline of the pink part of the pants, so that when I add this to that seam, then both of those will be finished, and I can top stitch it down, but I know my fabric's not going to fray from putting it on and off the doll. So with these pieces, I do want to press them. There's no texture here that I need to worry about, but I do want to get rid of that fold line from my fabric. You can also press your fabric before you cut it. I just have a smaller working space, so instead of pressing the big piece of fabric, I'm just pressing my little pieces here. This is the waistband, and we'll press those so those are nice and flat. And then the pockets are going to be pressed around the edges. The finished edge will be hemmed, because that's the opening of the pocket. But then I also like to press the edges around, because it helps hold them in place while I sew it onto the pant. So we're going to go ahead and just press those little edges all the way around on the pockets. Here we go. Now we'll do this side. And then here you can press instead of iron to press those down. I'm trying to be careful so my iron doesn't fall off on my leg. That wouldn't be very fun. Okay, and then the last edge. There we go. So I want to press these edges down, because that helps hold them in place when I go to sew it on the pant now. Then I can just back tack, sew, 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 back tack, and then my pocket is placed. Now that both legs have been put together, we're going to do the crotch seam. So after I just did the side seams, which was pretty self-explanatory, and top stitched it. Then I did the inseams just by folding right sides together. Now to put this together, what you want to do is leave one with the wrong side out. Take the other leg and turn it right side out. Here we go. So flip that like this. There we go. And we'll put the pocket here where we can see it. Then what we're going to do is we're going to insert the right side out inside the other one so that our right sides will be towards each other. So we're going to feed this down through the leg. Here we go. Oh, and there's sirens going on outside. Okay, so now we verify that our pockets should be right together because that's the front of the pant. And then we're going to line up the crotch seam. And I do like to pin the crotch seam just because it's kind of a weird curve and it's not just a straight line like the other ones. So I'm going to start at where the crotch seam meets the inseam and make sure that seam matches up. I like to put my seam allowance toward the back, but you can do whatever it is you like. That's just my preference. And I'm going to pin that. Then I'm going to work my way from that inseam, matching my curve to line up my edge up each side. And it won't take a lot of pins because, you know, you're only doing doll clothing, not people clothing. But then I get that pinned in place. And then I'll do the other side. And even though it seems a little strange, it actually will feed through your machine pretty easy. There's a little bit of turning that you need to do, but it's not too bad. So there we go. We'll pin this like so. Okay, so now I'm going to start at the top and then just sew down and back up. So we line it up here with 1/4 inch. There we go. And this seam I'm kind of leaving in real time just so you can kind of see a little bit easier how I feed it through. I do move my pins. Okay, and this pin, see how it's kind of wanting to work out because it's kind of a weird curve. So I'm just kind of adjusting, making sure my pins stay in place. And now I'm coming down to the bottom of that part of the curve where I'm going to get to the actual inseam. And so I'm kind of bringing the fabric forward as it feeds through the machine so I have more to grip and work with. And I can also make sure that my fabric is laying flat as I go through the machine, because once again, I've said this in several videos, so you've probably heard it before if you've watched very many, but you want to fool your machine into thinking that you're just sewing a straight line. And that kind of helps fabric go through your machine if you can adjust the material around what you're doing so that as it goes into the machine, it's just feeding straight through. You're not trying to sew around a curve. You're just adjusting fabric on the outside of where that needle is so that your machine just thinks, oh yeah, we're just feeding a straight seam through here. So there we go. We'll trim our fabric and then we'll take a look. So now our crotch seam is finished, and I will go ahead and run this through the serger, and then we'll come back and flip our pants right side out. So now I've run this through the overlock machine. I am very fortunate and recognize it as such to have an overlock machine because I love the way it finishes edges. But you can also do a zigzag stitch on your seam allowance if you want to finish that and to prevent some of the raveling. A lot of people like to use pinking shears, but my pinking shears are very old and not as sharp, and I haven't found anyone who can sharpen them yet. So I just like to run it through the overlock. Now I'm not going to run the waistline through the overlock because that will be contained inside the waistband, so there's no need. So now we're going to go ahead and pull one leg out of the other. There we go. And then we'll turn this one right side out. And here are our little capris thus far. So I'm hoping that the narrow leg is going to be more what I wanted. I can tell it is a little bit more narrow than the other ones now that I'm looking at it. So hopefully it will finish out the way I wanted it to. But here's our patch pockets. And then our waistband will be a pretty simple procedure. But now we're going to take a look at placing the trim on the pants. Before I can actually place the trim, I'm going to hem the edge. So the larger side is where it attaches to the pants, and the side with more of a curve is the hem. So before I can put it on, I am going to hem these edges on both of the trim pieces, and then we'll come back and put them on. Now that this is hemmed, we're going to go ahead and attach the trim to the leg of the pant. So I'm going to kind of turn it upside down here, so I've got the hem upwards. And with the right sides together, I'm going to measure 3/4 of an inch from the side seam. The last time I put the actual center of the overlap more towards the front of the pants, and I wasn't totally happy with that. So from the side seam, I'm going to measure 3/4 of an inch, and that's where I'm going to start my trim. So I'm going to place it on. So it's 3/4 of an inch from the side, and I'll pin, and then I'm going to wrap around towards the back of the pants. And I like my side seams to go toward the back. So make sure my seam allowance on the leg itself is laying towards the back. But I'm going to continue wrapping that trim around the pant leg. There we go. And now we have another seam allowance on the inside for the inseam. And here again, I'm going to lay that seam allowance toward the back of the pants and pin it down. I just prefer that, so I don't think it's really important, but since I do it, I thought I would mention it. Okay, and then I'm coming back around to where I'm going to overlap now. And this will have more of an overlap than the first pair I did, which is also how I actually wanted it to look. So I'm going to take that first pin out and just pin all those layers together. And then this pin, I'm going to take out and pin all those layers together. So there we go. We have it wrapped around. Now, I'm going to press my pins down so they're not sticking out so much. All right, so now, starting at the either inseam or side seam. It doesn't really matter. But because a lot of my overlap is close to the side seam, I'm going to start there, and I'm going to put this to the machine. And so this is a little more complicated than some of the other things I sew, because normally on pants you can just, hem it and turn it under and then do your inseam and your pants are done. But because we're adding this to the leg and because of that overlap, we end up with this circle that we're going to feed through our machine. But we're going to kind of pull this back and just lay it under the machine. And it is nice that we only have to worry about a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so your foot doesn't have to go way inside the leg, just right there on the edge. So we're going to line up our foot with the edge of the fabric, because that'll give us that 1/4 inch seam allowance, or about 1/4 inch. I'm going to sink my needle. I'm going to start sewing and take pins out as I go around. And then I'm also, as I sew a few stitches, here we'll sew a few, I'm going to get to my next pin, pull it out. Now I'm going to roll this leg forward from the back, adjusting my pins so they don't get caught, in the machine. And I have the button for the foot. I like to kind of bring my fabric underneath that so that it doesn't get caught as the needle's going up and down on this part of my machine. So I kind of try to bring that forward and underneath that little knob. Sometimes it'll kind of go to the side if there's enough fabric, but that just kind of helps me make sure my fabric's not getting caught and tangled on my machine. Also, that thread from where I started, I'm bringing it away from the needle. There we go, a little bit further. Take out my pin, because I don't want to risk breaking a needle in this part, because it's hard enough to kind of feed it through, but yeah, I don't want to risk ruining my stitches and breaking a needle while I'm trying to attach this. Take out a pin. So this is a little bit more slow going, but I thought I would show this part in real time just so you kind of have an idea of actually what's entailed. Hopefully my hand's not in the way. Here again, see how I'm constantly rolling this leg and bringing it forward so that I've got room to sew forward as I make progress. Here we go, and see, and I've got a loop of thread kind of caught on that little, I think it's called a needle threader on my machine. And now I want to match my seam. And it's okay if you sew down onto the seam allowance for your back tack. There we go, we'll pull it out. And then we'll go, and I guess we should trim those threads too. There we go. Trim our thread. Alright, now we'll pull it down and see how it turned out here. And this, I am much happier with. I gotta fix my hemline there. There we go. Alright, and I like this much better. It has more of the look that I wanted, to where the leg comes down and it's more closed. It comes down this way, so that is great. Now, on the seam allowance, it's up to your preference on if you want the inside seam allowance to be up or down. I wanted the top stitching to be on the pink rather than on the trim, because if you top stitch on the trim, you're going to close off part of this. And I want this to hang freely. I don't want top stitching on top of that split. So I put the seam allowance toward the leg of the pants rather than toward the hem, and then I top stitch on the pink. And this is a little tricky, and so here I'm going to turn it so it's inside out. Here we go. And then I'm going to put the seam allowance towards the pink part of the pant. So it's going to go up like so. You kind of have to bend it up there. If you want, you can press that in place so that it will lay a little bit more flat for your top stitching, which I will do. I'm going to go in at the inseam of my pants, which is here, and that's where I'm going to start my top stitching. And this is more difficult because this is a lot longer than just 1/4 of an inch, but you're going to pull it to where you're going to start. I have to find it. And we're going to do kind of the same type of thing in that we're just going to do a little bit at a time. So I'm going to put my needle down. There we go. Got my threads out of the way. And I'm just going to top stitch while everything is laying flat, just a little bit at a time on the pink. And then I'm going to continue rolling that so I can bring it forward and have room to sew, making sure to always make sure my seam allowance is towards the pant where I want it. Go a little bit, roll it forward again. It's just kind of like we did before, but now you've got more fabric over here because of the length of the trim. So there we go, a little bit at a time. And you want to make sure that none of your trim is bunched up under that seam allowance, because you don't want to catch your pretty trim underneath your top stitching. So there we go. We'll make sure everything's flat. And now we're coming to the side seam. So we're about halfway done. Okay, making sure everything's flat. And hopefully my hand is not in the way. I hope it's not. Gently help that through a little bit. There we go. And I have a feeling my top stitching is not going to be super straight, but it will be okay, and it will help hold the seam allowance in place like I want to do. And then rolling it forward. And now I'm coming back to where I started, so I'm going to get these threads pulled out of the way to where I can see them. There we go. I'm going to come back to where I started and do just a tiny little back tap. There we go. Pull that out. Now we'll trim away our threads. Thread there and here. Alright, so now we'll pull it back to right side out and double check, make sure it looks okay. And here's how it looks. So there we go. There's our little tulip overlap and our top stitching that holds the seam allowance where we want it. I guess I could have brought it a little bit more to the front, but I'm not going to change it. So there we go. There's one pant leg. Now I'll repeat the process for the second leg. And then on the waistband, it's pretty simple. So we're just going to sew the ends together, and then I'll press that seam open. Then with right sides together, we're going to just put it around the pants and have right sides together, sew the raw edge, and then we'll flip it up and turn it over and just make a casing for the elastic. So that's all we have to do for the waistband. So that's how we put the leg trim on, and I'll be back when we have that much done. And here is the final pink pants, and we'll go ahead and put them side by side to compare. So I definitely like the bottom of these better. They get more and more narrow towards the ankle, like I wanted them to, as opposed to flare out and get wider. There is a little bit of a buckle here, and I think it's because this fabric is so soft, and then this is a stiffer cotton, but it's okay. So yeah, so I do like the pants better with the adjustments made. And then once again, we have the little patch pockets, and then we also have the contrasting waistband casing to hold the elastic, so that turned out okay. Here's a little bit better view of the hoodie. So it's just got the little front pocket. It does have short little flared sleeves, and then a really big hood. Let's see if we can get the hair out of the way here. So you can see it has a really big hood, so it's kind of more for a design function, I guess. And then like the gray hoodie that I did a little while ago, this also has the opening from about this far up the hoodie to this far down the back, and then a snap, and that when it opens allows for a wider neck opening so you can get the head up through there since it's a pullover. So, and then of course just the oversized long sleeve undershirt just to add some more texture and a little bit of layering there. So yeah, and then it just has a ribbed collar up on the top. So it's pretty plain. It's just a plain shirt. It goes to about here, I guess. And but yeah, it just adds another layer in there. And then from some of the other patterns, you can also choose to do some colored leggings if you want the legs to actually have something else. I was thinking of like a pink lace legging that would show underneath there, but I just haven't got that far. So anyway, that's how the pants look with the alterations to the pattern. And that way, if you like this look better as well, you can make the same adjustments and go from there. So until we meet again, hopefully my voice will be better. Happy sewing. Bye.